Hello, and welcome back to From the Author's Chair. I've got a little Iron Angels update for you today. I just had my developmental edit returned, and I had a fantastic video chat with my editor about the feedback. Honestly, I'm really happy. There's no huge restructuring needed, but he picked up on some really insightful points that I wouldn't have noticed myself. Things like a side character that needs just a few more meaningful moments with Kellen, since they become quite important friends. Another character who starts off friendly, but probably shouldn't be right away because there's a bit of a class difference, and they'd be a bit more suspicious, perhaps, of Kellen's roughness. My editor felt that friendship should be a bit more earned, with some rubbed edges before it actually finally softens. And then they become quite close, and it works really well. And I do really agree with both of those points. These are the kind of small things that make a huge difference in the emotional depth of a story. A developmental edit isn't just about fixing plot holes or sorting timelines, though it does that too. It's also about enhancing character arcs, pacing, tension, things that shape how we connect with the story as a reader and perhaps don't always notice. Until it's done wrong, that is. So that's what I'm working on now, little by little, through May. I've already booked the next stage with my copy and line editor, who'll be reviewing it in end of June and officially starting to work on it through July. Which means Iron Angels is still right on track to release this year, and I'm so excited. Just a quick reminder for fellow authors, maybe it's the first time that you're writing a book. Publishing a book isn't just writing in a quiet room. It's a lot of communication and forward planning. You've got to reach out to editors and designers early, often months in advance. If you wait until after your draft is finished, you might end up stuck waiting in the queue, and it can take months. So plan ahead, get your team lined up. I contacted both of my editors a few months in advance and just kind of scoped out where their booking system was, and then worked around that to make sure it was ready in time. And then, while my dev editor had the book, I did some light writing and helped a friend proofread their book. And next time, while the copy editor is working on Iron Angels, I want to draft one of my other novellas. And if you're anything like me, you'll get this part. Creating is just normal. It's how I stay grounded and feel human every day. Even a day without writing feels wrong, off. Like something just isn't aligned in me. Like it just don't feel right. My mood is definitely worse. Do you feel that way too? That you have to create something to feel like yourself? Anyway, thank you for being here. Today we're going to be reading Chapter 9. And for those of you who are reading along, Chapter 9 is on page 91. Chapter 9. Hunted. The old couple had been kind about Yoshiko's tears, but she wanted to be calm when she approached her mother, asking Asumi to stop her recklessness and whether they could plan their next steps together. If she cried, her mother might see it as a sign of weakness. Asumi needed her to be strong and determined to move forward so they could return home. Now Yoshiko had met the townspeople and seen how they lived, she wanted to learn as much as she could and how to lead best. To do that, they needed to regain the castle and get rid of those who scared the people with their power hunger, curfews, and house raids. She held the basket closer as she reached the town, becoming more alert to signs of people. That people were disappearing worried her. Something made the hair on Yoshiko's neck stand on end, so she tried to run quicker again. Something was tugging at her, an urgency or some sense of danger. Would dawn come early? Were guards close and she'd not heard them while thinking about her mother? She couldn't tell what was setting her on edge, but her heart tugged. Something felt dangerous, as if there were a trap. Yoshiko slowed before she arrived at one of the hidden entrances to the caverns. This one on the edge of the main Hiei town and the closest one to the road towards the farm, and rested against the walls of a building. She expanded her senses, trying to watch out for guards or signs of danger. Instead of danger, though, it was all too empty. Thinking it was panic over everything from earlier, She dashed to where the entrance hid behind a stone wall. A giant wall circled a public garden that grew beautiful plum trees. Suki would love this place in spring, she thought. And Yoshiko couldn't wait for them to bloom to enjoy with her mother, even at night. The colours would glow in the moonlight, and a blanket of blossoms would rest over the ground, providing beautiful beds of pink, white, and purple. Spurred on by yet another thing to share with her mother, Yoshiko slipped into a gap between two fake walls. Just like the moat, a hidden door lay between the walls, and she could just about squeeze through the gap before the heavy trapdoor closed after her. The darkness swallowed her for a moment, but she lit a flame lantern that rested on the floor by her right foot, in an alcove she'd learned was in every entrance. The light bounced around her, and she dashed down the steps that led to the cabin she and her mother had been staying in. Jogging to the central dome, Yoshiko slowed to greet her mother with a smile. She wiped her face on her sleeve to hide any stubborn tear trails on her face. "Mama, I've returned!" Yoshiko called out, rushing forward to place the lantern in a rest and the basket beside it. "And I have a surprise." She was greeted with silence and darkness. "Mama?" Asami had been due back before her today. Yoshiko had travelled the furthest, and Asami was meant to be waiting for her. She's still out? Yoshiko frowned, knowing her mother had been gathering information, but Asami hadn't told her from where or what she wanted to find out. She'd been more secretive, not even telling Yoshiko where she was going. Yoshiko padded back to the lantern and the basket and picked it up. It was heavy. She tucked it into a nook in a stone hut they used for storing their belongings. Then, concerned her mother hadn't yet returned, Yoshiko wondered what to do. That uneasy feeling was back, and Yoshiko's heart froze. She strained to listen for any sound, every smell, and for her eyes to see all. Why hadn't Yoshiko asked her mother where she would be going? She'd have had some clue as to which entrance she'd use then. This place was so vast and full of tunnels you could miss someone in from a different route. She thought of the entrance she knew was near the castle, by the moat, and headed there. It would be the best place to begin. As far as she ran, she heard no sound other than the sound of her own feet pounding on the stone. The place was too quiet, as if anticipating something. She felt as if the whole town, above and in the caverns, was holding its breath, and it nearly made her lose her breath with fright. It couldn't be an earth shift, could it? Things always went silent then. Would they be safe underground? Is that why her mother wasn't here? But surely her mother would have told her that the underground wouldn't be safe in an earth shift. She tried to keep her nerves under control. This wasn't the time to panic. Fear is your worst enemy, her father would always say when she was scared. It can turn your brain and your body against you and be more of a danger than the thing that scares you. Breathe, calm your mind, and take back control. So she took deep, deliberate breaths. The cavern's musty air filled her lungs, and she tried to process the smells that came with it. She searched for the smell of her mother, finding a couple of trails that raised her hopes. But those scent trails just led her to places they'd been recently, empty of anything but memory. She growled. There wasn't any sign of Asami having returned to the caverns this night. Yoshiko slumped onto the stone ground back at the main cavern. If her mother was hurt or forced into hiding, it'd be in the area she was working in. She knew her mother would return as soon as she could, so should Yoshiko just wait? Yoshiko shook her head at this. Something tugged at her, saying she should look. Chinen had always told her in training that if your instincts were telling you something, you should listen. Yoshiko rested her cheek on her fist and stared at the ground. Where could she look? The only reason her mother wouldn't come back is if she thought it wasn't safe. Even if she was hurt, she'd do her best to return. It was safer to hide and recover in the caverns than in the town, and Yoshiko could help her. So it had to be that her mother thought she was being watched. If she was, she wouldn't come back to the caverns, as their hiding place would be found. and she couldn't hide in the town. The watcher could just grab her. Yoshiko startled. What if her mother had been found? Then she remembered her mother showing her a place in the outskirts where they could go if they thought they were being followed. A derelict farmhouse in the forest on the mountainside. It was far enough away that only those with dragon blood could run high speed for that long, and difficult terrain would exhaust anyone following on foot. There were also plenty of places to dive and weave and hide to lose their hunters, and people on horseback would struggle through the tight trees. If Asami thought it was too dangerous to go to the caverns, she'd go there and try to lose her pursuers on the way. Yoshiko leapt up and grabbed what she needed from their stash, then ran through the tunnels that led out closest to that forest towards the northwest, and rushed after her mother, dread flushing through her that her mother's life could be in danger. Yoshiko's lungs felt like they'd explode. She'd never run this far this hard before, but she couldn't stop. Slowing down would open her senses to follow her mother's trail better, but fear kept her going. What was it her father had said about fear before? Right now, it didn't matter. Instead, she saw the forest rise ahead on the foot of the mountain in the distance, and kept her eyes rigidly on her goal. She pushed herself harder, grimacing. Eventually, the forest loomed ahead of her, climbing the mountain like a giant wall of trees. Usually, she'd be impressed. Yoshiko loved looking at this giant forest. Sometimes she wondered why she and her mother didn't live there, among the trees like the little forest Kodama spirits she'd heard about in stories. Because of bears, Asami had said. It wasn't worth the risk. Even so, Yoshiko often thought the forest would be a better and healthier place to hide. They'd live amongst the warmth of the bark, feeling the fresh air and hearing the leaves rustle as a lullaby. It was nothing like the stale air and heartless stone of the caverns, which felt dark and lonely. But she understood. She thought, deep down, that Asami couldn't bear to be too far from the castle. Even so, one day, Yoshiko thought every time she saw the forest, I'll sleep here one day, even just one night. This time, Yoshiko thought nothing of it. She'd found her mother's scent. It was deep and warm, and she could pick it up against other smells with ease by now. Her mother had run this way, she knew it, and she'd been fast. Leaves and branches were crushed, but it looked like too much damage to just be her mother. Yoshiko slowed for a moment to crouch and look closer. Heavier, larger boots had also stomped here. So her mother had been chased. But if her mother was faster, and these boots looked like they'd travel slower and heavier, how could they have kept up with the escaping woman? She inspected the crushed ground closer and saw tiny prints. Of course, dogs. So that's how they managed to keep tracking her. Yoshiko froze. Dogs could find them, even track them to the cavern entrances if they picked up the trails. What if the hunters discovered the entrances? Yoshiko bit her lip. If she hadn't hunted the caverns, maybe she would have been able to catch up with her mother before the dogs could catch up. She dashed after the tracks, hoping she could still make it and help draw the dogs and the hunters off. As she got closer to the derelict farmhouse, the tracks spread more. Her mother had tried to shake off her attackers, but by this point, perhaps it was obvious where she was heading. Would Asami have turned off course and hidden elsewhere? But the tracks of the men and the dogs didn't stop either, steadily following her mother the entire way. Yoshiko's heart leapt, and she knew she should have crawled on the floor to pick up as many signs as she could, but her anxiety drove her back into a run. She skidded on leaves as she caught a smell. Her mother, definitely. But something was wrong. There was a dark smell, rancid and metallic, with something smoky mixed in. Her throat caught, and, unable to breathe, Yoshiko ran directly for the farmhouse. Please don't be her, she begged, gasping for air as she tumbled through the trees. Tears streaked down her face before she even knew what she'd find. She stumbled and caught herself on branches, gashes catching on her skin. Her mother would have killed the men who hunted her, she knew. Asami was a powerful warrior. She could have killed them all. She had the dragon curse, too, so she was stronger. Surely, at moments like this, she'd risk the curse and use all her might. Believing nothing else, Yoshiko ignored the burning pillars of smoke ahead and the way the air rippled with a strange shimmer and dived forward. Her soul oozed out of her with the stress of what she'd find. Every second it took to reach the farmhouse felt like she'd burst from her body. Legs screamed, lungs screamed more, smoke now mixing with the stress of running so hard, and Yoshiko nearly did scream out with the effort. She lunged through the smoke surrounding the farmhouse into its courtyard, and saw it wrecked more than ever. Scorch marks sizzled and smoked with small embers of white fire. The dusty ground was a confusion of tracks, prints, and skids, as if bodies had fought hard here, fallen, and been thrown. Yet, despite the evidence that so many people had fought and fallen here, only one remained. Yoshiko swayed, rooted to the spot. She knew that body, those clothes, that hair that now lay messy, spread across the dirt and fanned across the face. She knew the pale skin, covered in dirt and blood. Mama? One sandal was lost, and the one that remained was dusty and marred on Asami's pale foot, twisted at an unnatural angle. She remembered those shoes. She remembered picking them out for her mother happily, only recently, when they replaced their clothing. They should have lasted her much longer. Now, stained with dust and blood with the skeleton of a leaf clinging onto it, the one that remained made Yoshiko choke. Finally, she dared to step closer. Wishful thinking made her hope there was a chance her mother was hanging on. She must be. She was so strong and clever. There must have been a way for her to win. Yoshiko's legs dragged beneath her with the strain of running. Her leg twinged, but she shuffled on. She didn't even think to look about her for the people who'd hunted her mother. Only her mother mattered. Heart dead, Yoshiko almost thought she'd let the enemy catch her. Did things even matter anymore if Asami was dead? She'd be alone. Yoshiko fell to her knees beside her mother and reached out to touch her. Yoshiko's reaching arms shook. She could even see it. And as her fingers brushed Asami's delicate chin, Yoshiko drew her hand back with a cry. It was scorching. Taking a deep breath, Yoshiko reached again. She was cursed with dragon blood too. She could handle a few burns. Wanting to see her mother's face, she struggled to move the hair out of the way. An unfamiliar noise escaped Yoshiko's throat, something between a moan and a bawl. Asami's face, or what of it Yoshiko could see past the blood, once the most beautiful thing that Yoshiko loved, was marred with determination, suffering, and a gouge from an animal's teeth or claws. The dog's. There was no hope Asami could have survived. Yoshiko slumped, falling face first into her mother's shoulder, pushing Asami fully onto her back. She screamed into her mother's stomach, scaring even herself with the animalistic cry that escaped. Her body shook, and she knew that if her mother were alive, she'd have felt this and given her a sign. But Asami didn't move, and her burning body was growing cold. Asami had been left too damaged. There had been no grace or honor, no quick death. She'd been beaten, broken, damaged. Bones were fractured and crushed and showed obvious signs of disfigurement all over, and her skin was lacerated, bruised, and burned. Joined by dog attacks and punctured and gashed where weapons had got her, the soldiers who had killed her mother had been dishonorable. No respect for their warlord. She'd been killed with a vile energy that made Yoshiko lose what little contents were in her stomach to the floor beside her mother. No one should die like this. That was chapter 9. And if you're still sitting with the final, no one should die like this, you're not alone. That bit gets me every time. This chapter marks a turning point. Until now, the story's been simmering, slowly building the world, the layers, the tensions. But now the stakes shift. The grief hits. The danger isn't abstract anymore. It's really right there in Yoshiko's face, which I think she needed. She's a very naive character, a dreamer. And her character growth arc is very steep from here. This moment, like this big loss shapes so much of who Yoshiko becomes. It's brutal, unfair, raw, and it should be, because not all fantasy is just adventure and wonder. Sometimes it's also facing the unbearable, about what happens to someone when the world rips something irreplaceable away, or when they realize that it's a lot more unfair than they thought. I won't say too much. I want the story to speak for itself. But I do want to thank you for listening. So if this hit you, take a moment after this one. Take a breath. Feel whatever you need to feel. Not just now, but in general in life, I guess. That's what I like about fantasy. It lets you feel things. And then I'll see you next time for chapter 10. Keep creating, keep feeling, and keep writing stories that matter. See you next time.